Hey now, this is the Screen Watching Podcast hosted by me, Dan Barrett, co-hosted by this guy, Simon Foster. Folks, big show this week. Simon, you went and saw one of the very few things that's actually new and interesting this week.
Yes, it is a very quiet week for the screen watchers around the world. I saw Toy Story 5, and the last time I said the fifth movie was the best in the series was a long time ago. Will I be saying it again this week?
I believe the only answer to a fifth entry actually being any good had the Assignment Miami Beach afterwards.
I knew you were going there, my friend. I know your thoughts on that little franchise. So what are you talking about this week? There's bugger all on television.
Sorry, just to explain to almost like the 99.9% of other people, Police Academy Assignment Miami Beach.
They get it. They know.
It's the first in franchise without Mahoney, but that's neither here nor there. Now, usually on the show, I'll talk about something which is scripted. I'm a scripted guy. Scripted TV is generally my bag. But this week, effing nothing's going on. So I took a look at what I think is probably the most interesting release of this week, and it's actually pretty interesting. There is a rise at the moment as we're starting to look at the end of US late night chat shows. So think about Stephen Colbert going off the air the other week. The ratings haven't necessarily been so great for the other ones, and there's a lot of conversation about the end of the US late night chat show. But in its wake, much like the rest of television, reality TV has been disappearing from broadcast TV, but it's becoming really prominent over on YouTube. Same thing's happening with chat television. And in the last couple of weeks, we've seen a whole bunch of new shows launching with people adopting old school late night chat show formats, but trying to adapt it for a YouTube audience. The biggest of these releases came out this week. It's a show called Outside Tonight, which while I don't think it's actually paid for by the fine people at YouTube, I believe it's got a lot of support from YouTube as an organization. It debuted this week. I'm going to offer a couple of thoughts on that. But also,
that will
Simon,
be interesting, I know. Look, and I'm going to revisit a romantic fantasy classic that I got to watch again after many years, and God, it still delivers. And what is that other thing that you're watching?
Look, I'm going to take a look at I'm just going to say what it is. I mean, you hedged around the fact that you're going to talk about The Princess Bride.
Yes,
Let's just tell people what's coming up.
I was selling the sizzle.
That wasn't enough. Tell people you're going to talk about The Princess Bride. People love that movie.
They sure do.
I found myself, I grew up in the very late, I was a child of the 80s, but, by the time you become like a conscious human being, like usually a little bit older. So there was a TV show, a sitcom called A Different World. It was a Cosby Show spinoff.
Here we go.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
But I'd never seen it.
Okay.
Like I knew that it was on TV. I've got a vague recollection of it, like being on Channel 9 maybe at some point. Okay, but I don't really remember it at all. There's a reboot revival TV series coming to Netflix in a couple of months' time. And so I thought I'd take a look back at one or two episodes of A Different World, the original run, just to get my head across exactly what the show was outside of just knowing it was a Cosby Show spinoff and all the weight that comes with that. Is it a show that stands on its own? And is there a non-Cosby related reason we should be watching it in a little while? The problem was, Simon, I watched one or two episodes and now I'm about 17 episodes deep. Folks, we're going to talk about A Different World and why I found myself in that. We've got all that, and also literally we're recording this at Saturday morning at 6:44 a.m. and we found out within the last sort of hour or two, as we've woken up, maybe it's a couple of hours old at this point, who knows, James Burrows died. One of the absolute titans of American sitcoms. Got nothing to do with A Different World. Okay, I can put that out there. But we'll talk about the death of James Burrows in just a short while. We're going to play some opening titles and come back and talk about Mr. Burrows.
This is not like TV, only better.
Television! Teacher! Mother!
Secret lover.
What, that's it? That's your movie?
Well, I said that I had an idea for a movie.
Okay, Simon, this is the Screen Watching Podcast. James Burrows has died. Like that's
it's
a
very
big
sad.
thing.
It is a very big thing, and as you pointed out, as we record this, we only read this news like an hour ago, so it's all very fresh in our minds. Even for the movie guy, I understand what a huge name in the world of television directing James Burrows is. This is your field. I'm going to let you run off some of his credits and talk to his legacy, but it's a huge loss for the industry. He's got an amazing legacy of work behind him. Tell us your thoughts on Mr. Burrows.
Look, so James Burrows died at the age of 85. He's a guy who he's we use the word sort of nepo baby, and he certainly came into the industry through his father. His father was working within, the world of stage. It's New York sort of family, and so Broadway and stage productions, it's a vital industry. And so he came up learning his craft through that, and then found his way in Hollywood directing television. He started out on Mary's Harlan Moore Show productions, like MTM productions. Started out there, found his way to Taxi, which is where he met Glenn and Les Charles, who then went on to co-create Cheers with James Burrows. And so when you go from Taxi, which is a very well-regarded, maybe not the most successful of sitcoms, run, I think, 5 seasons across 2 networks, so it's like a bit of a middling success. But certainly when you go off then and co-create Cheers, like that kind of writes your ticket. He's one of these directors where, directs the pilot and then for select shows would be there for the entire run of the show. He was there for the entire run of Cheers from the early season where it just was barely surviving into its second season to suddenly becoming one of the most successful defining sitcoms of television's history.
Absolutely, yeah.
Then goes off from that to develop, and while he's working on Cheers, he starts to develop this reputation as someone who gets called in to direct sitcoms, like the pilot episode for sitcoms, and set up those shows. And what he does is he doesn't just come in and sits in the control booth, but really he's actually out there working as a director with the cast. He's working from that sort of early sort of casting period to really help these shows get up and running on their feet. If you jump into his IMDb, you will see so many credits over the years for sitcoms which are hugely successful, a whole bunch that people just don't remember.
He was the go-to guy to kickstart a series. The studios, the networks knew that he had the more often than not the magical touch to get a pilot working, to get the relationship between the actors, the very essence of the comic material up there on the screen for the first few episodes. So yeah, you're absolutely right. When you rattle off the credits.
Let's talk about some of the success he had. As I said earlier, we're talking about shows like Taxi and Cheers, but then goes on to be the guy responsible really for launching Friends, for Will and Grace, like some of these absolute huge defining sitcoms.
When you rattle them off, I always think of Frasier as very much a James Burrows show,
absolutely.
And he was central to that. Then you rattle off things. He could go from the sublime, like Frasier, like Cheers, to the ridiculous, like Third Rock from the Sun, star-driven stuff like Carolyn in the City and Will and Grace. So he just had this amazing touch with the film camera. I was reading, and it might have been in the Variety obit of him, that he was the first one to introduce a 4th camera to a multi-camera setup, which opened up the shows incredibly well. It changed the format to a certain extent, and he applied that to just over 100 TV series and nominated for a record 22 Director Guilds Awards. So it speaks to his standing in the industry as to what a loss this is.
Yeah, now you mentioned Third Rock from the Sun. Just to be clear, this is a show that he directed, I think, 2 or 3 episodes of. But that's kind of the thing with his career. He's just got all these shows that he just sort of essentially launched and just let going. One of the ones which, probably not the proudest, but certainly one of the most successful shows, 2.5 Men, that was a pilot he directed. And also The Big Bang Theory was another one of his. So we're looking at a incredible, career. And I just want to maybe address just right at the end here, he released a book, autobiography a couple of years ago called Directed by James Burrows, 5 decades of stories from the legendary director of Taxi, Cheers, Frasier, Friends, Will and Grace, and more. If you jump on Spotify, you can get the audiobook for it, which he's doing the narration for. It's an incredible listen and read.
Wonderful. And I should point out, only one time forayed into big screen movies, and it was a terrible flop called Partners, which was a Ryan O'Neal film. That was just terrible. So it didn't translate to the big screen. I don't know how much he tried after that to get movies off the ground, but I can't imagine it ever bettering his legacy as a TV director.
And look, if you want to end with some amazing trivia, he may have had the film called Partners, but also he was a director on the 90s sitcom Partners. And then also there was another Partners that was made like maybe about 10 years ago, also directed that.
Oh, good Lord. Couldn't let
Indeed.
it go.
Anyway, Simon.
James Burrows.
Absolutely.
End of an era.
A talented guy, and also, from what I understand, really good guy. Simon Foster, do you want to take us maybe into the world of Toy Story?
Let's do that. Let's play a quick clip, and then I'll come back and chat Buzz and Woody and Jessie.
Do you, Forky, take Karen Beverly to be your beloved bride?
Yay!
I now pronounce you husband and knife. Poison the maid of honor!
Bonnie, there's a package for you.
Oh, thank you, thank you.
Hi there, I'm Lilypad. Let's play.
Oh, extinction, not again!
All the gang is back, and I mean all the gang is back in Toy Story 5, which tells the story, this time from the focus of Jessie, the cowgirl, voiced by Joan Cusack. She takes centre stage in this narrative in which she's sort of got a two-pronged mission. She's trying to find a friend for her owner, Bonnie, voiced by Scarlett Spears. I don't have any relation there, maybe. But she's finding that the kids of the neighbourhood are very much glued to their screens. Technology has invaded the suburbs, and kids aren't playing anymore, not with their old toys or even new toys, unless they've got screens on them. Bonnie's parents hold out until they decide to get her a Lilypad device, voiced by Greta Lee, and Jessie finds herself facing the rejection from her owner in much the same way that Buzz and Woody have done in previous episodes. And here's where I start to sort of rub against the Toy Story franchise a little bit. Number 5, despite the whole franchise being wrapped up very neatly and very well with number 3, which many regard to be the best of the Toy Story films. And then number 4 came out, and it was a beautiful piece of animation, but kind of unnecessary as an extension of the characters. Now we're into 5, and the adventures of Buzz, Tim Allen, and Woody, Tom Hanks, have been pushed into the background of their own movie. They're essentially support players in a subplot that involves finding and helping Jessie when it's really Jessie who is torn between 2 locations and 2 friends and tries to come to terms with the fact that she may not be as relevant as she once was. This is all starting to sound very familiar to fans of the Toy Story. If it captures the magic, if it captures the essence of these characters as it has in the past, that would be good enough. But I don't think Toy Story 5 does. And it's had some pretty solid reviews along the way, but it's a legacy franchise that a lot of the reviewers out there are coming of age as reviewers were deeply influenced by the first couple of Toy Story movies. So you can see that there is a whole lot of goodwill, not only from the audience, but from the critical mass out there as well. And I think that may be playing into some of their reviews. I hate reviewers who take other reviewers to task, so I'm definitely not trying to do that. But I think there's flaws with Toy Story 5 that are being overlooked in some of the reviews. There's a few laughs, but not that many. I found the first half of this film particularly sort of tiresome. And I'm the first to admit that when they sort of played the manipulative music and some of the realizations that friends won't be friends forever, or friends change, or making new friends can be just as good as having old friends, I got a bit teary towards the end. So it did what a Toy Story movie is meant to do. But is it a particularly necessary or entirely well thought out or structured film? I don't think it is. It'll be colourful enough for the littlies and for most parents, and it is good to see Conan O'Brien voicing a new character. He gets most of the film's big laughs, but generally I found this one a little bit of a slog.
My issue with Toy Story is that I saw the third one, and after that I was like, I don't really need more of this. Like I'm good. But we're looking at Toy Story 5, which is, 30 years now since the very first one.
31 years, yeah.
31 years. I think about my own sort of interests in television broadly. One of my issues with, it's more a thing that probably impacts sitcoms more than anything else, is just the improbability that if you think about, say, like a workplace comedy, that all these characters would still be employed at the same place. Like, how often do you go from, like, day one when you start in the job, when you're the new person, to working with the exact same people across like 6 seasons with almost, no changes? Like, it just doesn't really happen. And it's the same with every other sitcom based on like a premise where you're like, well, it's just improbable all these characters together. I look at Toy Story, I look at 31 years of these characters all sitting together. Yes, they've introduced a couple of new toys, but like the core toys are still all hanging out together. And how many toys are still being used by kids like after 31 years? Like, I know that's a thematic thing that comes up regularly throughout this as a franchise, but realistically, like, maybe Buzz is hanging together like by a string. But
they address
it's just not happening.
They address that in the film with Jessie's character still sort of carrying the phone numbers of or the addresses of her past owners. But why is a cowgirl doll being passed down from owner to owner? But after 31 years, they're gone. I should point out, and this is with all due respect to Little Ted and Giraffe, I've still got my cuddly toys from the day I was born. They still are on my bedside table in there, sitting there, and I held them with great affection. In fact,
but there's a difference between, like, a beloved teddy bear and 8 to 12 just disposable toys that is a cowboy and a astronaut and a cowgirl and a etch a sketch.
Slinky. I mean, when was the last time that a Slinky lasted 31 years? They barely lasted 10 minutes in my house.
Miss Potato Head, you may have a shoe still, but that's about it.
Can I just say, in a broader sense, is there something a little bit on the nose about a media empire like Disney preaching to us how best to sort of meld playtime and screen time?
Come on, I mean, this is what Hollywood Entertainment's built on.
I know, but I just felt a bit funny about that. So that's just me, I guess. But yeah, so this one I think is I've been a little bit cranky about the big summer movies this year. I was down on Disclosure Day. I'm down on Toy Story. We're seeing Supergirl in the week ahead, and we'll review that next week. So I hope I'm a bit more upbeat about that, but we'll see.
First look reviews came out yesterday, I think it was. It all seems pretty positive. But anyway, I'm looking forward to that. But let's move on. You mentioned the word funny a moment ago. That was the segue I was looking for before you detoured a little bit off from that. Outside Tonight, it's the brand new late night chat show. Is it going to usurp what we've known from the format for years and years by way of this being on YouTube? Let's watch a clip.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Outside Tonight, the internet's late night show. I am your host, Julian Shapiro Barnum. Some of you watching might know me from my work with kids. If you've never heard of me, all you need to know is that I'm a comedian, writer, 6'2", 160 pounds soaking wet, which is always, dog uncle, love to party, mostly sober, poppers only, God-fearing with a single earring, unable to drive, willing to learn, very willing to dream. A passionate lover and even more passionate about late night television. All right, let's get into it. Y'all, late night TV is struggling, and there's no way around it. Last year, Kimmel's show was taken off the air. A few weeks ago, Colbert's show was canceled, and just last night, Conan O'Brien died. Okay, not really, but clearly something's wrong. While Conan might still be alive, for now, the studio model is sucking the life out of the genre, and it's not because of the hosts. Over the past couple years, though, the internet has taken the concept of late night and broken it up into a million tiny pieces.
Outside Tonight takes a really interesting sort of dig at the late night talk show in that it ditches the studio entirely, still keeps the audience. So it's essentially keeping the framework of the traditional late night show in that the host, who's this young guy named Julian Shapiro Barnum, I think he's 26 years old. He comes out, he'll do a monologue, he will have a guest that he interviews, he does a weekly segment. In this one, he's talking to a panel, or actually does two segments. There's one which is a straight comedy segment, one which is like another interview segment, wind out with a band, and he does this with the studio audience, all in about 28 minutes. Okay, it's a very jammed show, but retains the structure really of a traditional late night show. But it's definitely, as a sort of structural beast, it's a lot looser. The problem with it, though, is that I think that while they are trying to combat the looseness of the surrounds, so when you're out there filming in a real environment and it changes week to week, he won't be in the same place every week. I think he's in Battery Park in New York in this first episode, and it'll always be around New York somewhere. But he's there in a park, and there's a lot of things that can go wildly wrong while you're producing some live television out in a park somewhere. Okay, and I think that the looseness of it all, they try to contain that, and particularly the fact that you also got a host who's fairly inexperienced hosting this kind of thing, by being overly scripted. And so essentially, while this is supposed to feel a little bit sort of loose and frenetic, at the same time, it just feels so contained, and I found myself sort of really admiring the chutzpah of going ahead with the format that I've got here, but also maybe just a little bit frustrated at just how regimented this whole thing is.
This seems like, to me, if not the natural progression, maybe an understandable progression from the traditional late night show formats that we've been watching all these years. We had the John Mulaney thing over the last couple of years, which sort of tried to deconstruct the format a little bit, and now there's this. There is definitely a changing of the guard, or a changing of the attitudes about late night formatting and how the shows work, that I think is really interesting. I don't know if this is the answer. I didn't warm to him too much, and I think you're right.
You've watched this?
Yeah. And I think that I found the obviously scripted comedy moments, and we should point out that even the monologue is scripted and it's written, so it's not like there hasn't been written comedy in the late night show format up to now. I didn't quite warm to him, and I didn't quite warm to some of the guests, but I can see it becoming a more free flowing, easier to watch thing as it progresses. So I'm kind of in, and if it keeps the format alive, and God knows YouTube is ruling the world at the moment, it's certainly ruling cinemas, and it's moving in the right direction as a major sort of TV player as well, and already is. So if it keeps the format alive in this format, then I'm okay with it.
Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of touched on it, which is this idea of the first night out versus what it might feel like in a couple of weeks to months' time. And yeah, I think that this guy, Shapiro Barnum, I wasn't particularly that sort of into him from this first episode. It felt like he was speaking thematically. This very first episode is about the idea of age and sort of whether or not you feel mature or not. And so he talks to people, his guests, and then also his own monologue reflects at this, about like how they feel about like the stage in their life. Have they been successful enough in love and profession? Have they, just the various elements that are sort of
that I
markers of
quite
age.
liked. I did not mind that. I thought it was good if they're not just guests who are spruiking their latest movie or book or TV show. They're on there to communicate and talk and be open. It's a very young New York sort of feel to it, this show.
Yeah, but the problem with that sort of young New York feel is that I think we've got a very young host at the core talking about sort of age and maturity coming through. It becomes a little bit alienating to some of the older audiences as well. Okay, I just kind of felt it just didn't feel entirely well thought through as a subject matter for the first episode. And I'm not a big fan of late night chat shows having a theme running through. Like Mulaney did this with his show. You've got Late Night Tonight used to hold fairly closely to this in the earlier seasons of the program. But broadly, you've just got, I just think it's a bit restrictive in terms of getting some fairly honest conversation that can go off topic around the place as well. Like people are always trying to ham just a bit too close to making sure they got this thematic sort of idea running through the whole thing. I don't really dig that. But this takes place as part of this sort of broader push towards young comics trying to own this sort of late night chat space. And so they're taking what came before it, but mixing it in with sort of new elements. And to me, this feels a lot like these sort of early era sort of years of podcasting, where people were taking sort of traditional radio formats and sort of taking this new on-demand medium. It feels like we're in a very similar space to that. And I think this is what all these new hosts are kind of glomming us the idea of, which is that if I can become like the guy sort of early in, I can become like your like Mark Maron's or someone and really sort of dominate this space for like the next sort of 15, 20 years. So you've got Julian Shapiro Barnum doing it on this show, but then also in the last couple of weeks, we've seen a launch of Good Night with Ben Glebe, which is a lot more of a traditional studio-based program. But the twist of this, the innovation, is that the studio isn't taking place in an actual like television studio. He's converted part of his house into a TV studio. And the vibe of it feels a lot more like, it feels a lot more like community television. To a certain degree, but it kind of works. Ben Glebe is a fairly sort of charismatic guy, but he's sort of overloaded a little bit too much with a lot of gimmickry. So he's developed, like over the years of being a stand-up comedian and doing a bit of online podcasting stuff, he's developed his own audience. So he brings those in as a like remote viewing audience who are watching the program, and he sort of throws to them, and it's a bit too much. Every episode runs about like 90 minutes, which is maybe fine if you're Johnny Carson 40 years ago, 50, 60 years ago, as people are falling asleep on the couch, but expecting people to watch a 90-minute chat show, it's just too much.
This may be material for a bigger, broader special edition of Screen Watching somewhere down the track, but...
Which will never happen.
I know. But the point we are right now, with internet web film language now sort of dominating the box office charts with Obsession and certainly Backrooms.
I mean, I don't buy into that too much, but sure.
I know. And this is what I want to discuss with you, because I think we have to start buying into it. I wrote a piece this week about microdramas, the vertical format that is on your phone.
Which also don't exist.
Which exist in huge numbers, Dan. And
no, they don't for Western audiences, Simon.
They do to an extent. The point I want to try and make is, and this plays to outdoor. What's it called? Outdoors Tonight.
Outdoor Tonight. Outside Tonight.
There is a very young demographic who are watching their screens in a very different way than you and I ever have. Are we at a point now, probably more than any other point in the last 4 or 5 decades, where a younger generation are now of such might and of such influence that they're dictating where the formats go, where the screen watching, how it's done, how it's made, where it's watched. I'm sensing that we're at a point now where traditional formats are being challenged like they never have before.
So I think you've fallen into a bit of a fallacy, which is that it's young people that are driving this. That's not necessarily really true. When you start looking at YouTube audiences, why we're seeing an explosion of YouTube in the last couple of years is that YouTube viewership on connected TV has exploded. And a lot of that viewership is coming from much older viewers, Simon. Viewers like me, viewers like you, older viewers. Like, it really is. A lot of older people are finding their way to YouTube, and it's partly because
but that's not what Outdoors Tonight is going after.
No, but we're not strictly just talking about Outdoor Tonight, Outside Tonight. We're talking about the sort of idea of these late night talk shows. Keep in mind that Outside Tonight, Good Night with Ben Glebe, and if you want to take it a little bit further to talk about like the Amy Poehler chat show, and like there's another 7 or 8 other shows which are doing similar things. Probably my favorite one is, I can't think of the name of the program now off the top of my head. It's this guy that's basically riding the New York train system and interviewing people along the way.
Yep.
All these formats are really borrowing from TV formats that have come before. Like, it's not like they're really reinventing anything at all. It's really just that they're taking a late night chat show and just adapting it to a on-demand audience. This guy who's interviewing people on the train, like, there's very little difference between that as a program and like Iconoclast, which used to air on IFC like 25 years ago. Like, it's all the same types of programming. It's just being distributed through a new channel. And the reason why there's that familiarity is because like these are elements that just generally work. I don't think that just because the show is being produced for YouTube means that it needs to feel entirely new. The things that work are the things that have always kind of worked, and the people that will be successful at this are the ones that are sort of cognizant of that.
But I think the point we're missing here is
I'm just saying it's not a youth thing. It's a TV, just audience thing across the board.
That's in terms of the home viewer. I'm talking about the language that's being used in film. And that's not just in movies like Backroom, but also in the way movies are being filmed with a very central character and a center to the frame that are being made to fit your iPhone. There's a terrific piece of editing that's happening on YouTube at the moment that breaks down the latest Disney trailer for the movie Hex that shows just how films are being filmed in widescreen because they know they've got to go to cinemas, but are being filmed in such a way that the middle of the frame is where the bulk of the action takes place because so much is watched on the phone. And I think that's why I know you poo-poo it, but the microdrama movement is gaining traction and is huge to a certain extent.
Not.
Okay, well, you say that, but we know it is.
Sorry, Simon, what's your favourite microdrama? What have you watched? Name one that you've watched.
That's the point I'm saying. 58-year-olds aren't tuning into microdramas. I'm saying that 25-year-olds and younger go to it in a huge way.
No, but they're not, Simon. They're doing this across Asian audiences. This is the thing. So the last couple of years, Simon, there's been this. Okay, we're really off topic. We need to get back onto this because short show is what we're looking for. The problem with microdramas is that they are hugely successful across Asia.
Yes.
And so they're talking about like the billions of dollars that they're able to make through revenue, from these massive audiences who are watching it. Because microdramas are transactional. So you're paying a couple of bucks for every episode coming through. So there's a good sort of revenue stream coming through. All these people, much like Julian Shapiro Barnum and Ben Glebe and these people who are trying to get on the ground floor of this gold rush of people moving to YouTube as a, venue for their late night chats, there's people who are like, well, let's get on the ground floor for this gold rush of what's possible with all this, with micro dramas. The thing is that despite the fact that these trade press publications like Variety and THR run stories on the regular about like the rise of micro dramas, they're still quoting the same financial figures coming through from Asia. There's very little to suggest that Western audiences are actually adopting this at all. You never hear about people talking about micro dramas in real life. It doesn't really happen, Simon. This is a thing where if you're writing for a trade publication, you're just looking for the next story. You're looking for what might be a trend. And so this is the thing of the moment, but basically this is no different than...
But I think if I was
like just whatever trend comes up every 2 to 3 years, like it's just not gaining traction.
I can't disagree with that more. I think if I was sitting on a train full of people under 25, I would like to ask them if they knew what their favourite microdrama were.
Well, go and do that, and you're not going to hear people talking about So one of the things I do on the train all the time is I look at other people's screens,
right?
And they're just watching stuff on Instagram. They're watching stuff on like TikTok. They're not really watching micro dramas. It's just not really a thing, Simon. Like Variety may publish the pieces about it, but also they'll talk about that company that's trying to push micro dramas. It's pretty rare that you'll hear them talking about a micro drama. It just doesn't happen. Like there's no cultural cut through for any of these things. They don't exist.
I find that an extraordinary thing to say. To say that they don't exist is nonsense, because they do exist, and they do exist fairly huge numbers.
No, but they're not though, Simon. Like, tell me what those numbers are for Western audiences, for these companies that are setting up in Los Angeles at the moment, producing content for Western audiences, not producing content for the Asian market, because a lot of the production happening in Los Angeles is doing that. Okay, but find me some numbers of how successful it is in the US, for Australia, for the UK. Like, find me those numbers, because they don't exist, the numbers that people want to talk up.
So when Variety reports that the microdrama content will be a $26 billion industry by the turn of the decade, is that just based on nothing?
No, it's based across largely of Asian consumption.
So it's got no growth potential for you in the Western culture?
Everything has potential.
Right.
But it's been years now that we've seen the rise of micro dramas, and they haven't risen. Like, it just isn't actually really happening. Like, user behavior online is really quite different across Asian territories to what's happening in Western markets. We know this from the social networks that are being used from like all sorts of platforms. It's just a different experience. People are willing to spend in different ways. It isn't happening within Western markets. I mean, I'm not saying it'll never happen, but there's been no evidence after quite a few years now of the rise of microdramas, them actually rising. It just isn't happening. Viewership in Western audiences is so much more traditional than I think a lot of people really give it credit for.
Mm. I'm going to revisit this discussion in 18 months' time. And I will say, and I'll return to my point that at this moment, we're at a point where content is changing and it is being driven by a younger audience and the way in which they watch their content.
Content is always driven by younger audiences. That happens with every generation. What I'm seeing at the moment with the rise of backrooms and obsession, it feels no different to me than in the early 2000s when we started seeing the rise of things like Blair Witch Project and found footage. Like, it's just kind of the current technology is defining what we're seeing sort of being reflected on big screen, which is kind of how it's been every decade as new filmmakers come through. It's reflective of, movement. I mean, the 70s were quite different to the 80s. The 80s are quite different to the 90s in terms of that content being delivered. Just decade on decade, it always changes because that's how culture is. It moves forward, it evolves, it adapts. The thing that I think is probably worth just combating that idea of, things are being filmed now for iPhone consumption. Look in this last week where Screen X, which is very much built around the idea of seeing footage on your left and right of a screen, they've announced like this big deal with the new Spider-Man movie coming out where they're filming stuff now for Screen X formats. If that's successful and off the back of a Spider-Man movie, I suspect it's going to be, you're going to start seeing a lot more investment where it's not about filming content for what could be consumed on a vertical phone view, but really we're looking at things which is a, 180-degree sort of experience. Like, there's... Things evolve. It just depends on where the money starts flowing and where the heat is at any given moment. I don't necessarily think that you're going to start seeing a lot of movies filmed for vertical consumption because I don't know the money's necessarily there to support it just yet.
They're already been,
if ever.
Movies in the traditional sense of movies, you're not going to see a 90-minute film being filmed for vertical consumption. But
that's kind of what you're talking about with this Variety article where they're saying that, Disney movies are being filmed with the idea of consuming like the center. of the frame.
That's true. That's just how movies are being framed at the moment. They're being framed to be watched on phones.
Well, I mean, this is what this guy is claiming. I'd like to.
But they're not. But I'm talking exclusive phone content like microdramas are. They're specifically not the same as movie
those are made for
content
vertical
because-
video.
Yeah,
Yeah.
In 3 and 4 minute grabs.
Yeah, but my argument is
not-
that doesn't actually really exist within Western audiences. So
That doesn't exist. I think
not really, not in a way that's meaningful.
completely.
Everything exists.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, screen watching's got an audience.
And hello to both of you out there who are still with us at this point of the podcast. Let's move
Okay,
on.
Simon, let's blitz through this.
All right, what are we up to?
Let's talk about The Princess Bride, can we?
Oh, my goodness me. We were a house divided on The Princess Bride. It is one of the defining films of my generation and of my movie going. It is an adorable film and remains so to this day. But I've got a wife who didn't love the first time she watched it. So we promised to revisit it together. She changed her mind, of course. There was something about that first viewing that obviously timing wasn't right. But we watched it again last night, and it is still the most adorably lightweight yet meaningful film. And it's ridiculous to say that it's Rob Reiner's best film, given the amazing lineup of movies the late great director had. But
I mean, The American President was less than 10 years later.
Exactly right, and the run.
And let's
of
not
films,
forget North.
the run of films that he had. But his deftness of touch, the comic performances he drew out of his cast. I was surprised at how much of the film doesn't feature Mandy Patinkin as Inigo Montoya. He made such an impact with quite a few scenes. Wallace Shawn remains just as funny as he was, inconceivable, all these years. And I forgot what a great comic performance Carrie Elwes gives as the Dread Pirate Roberts, or his incarnation of it. So just having stumbled across it again in a quiet week for movies, I thought it was time to revisit a classic, and it absolutely holds up in every way. Probably more so. You realise now what a gorgeous studio film it was. To imagine something like that being made by a studio nowadays, taking a risk on something like that is inconceivable. So love The Princess Bride.
The Princess Bride is beloved to this day. It is absolutely outrageous to me hearing that your lovely wife does not like the movie. Okay, but also, you know what? Hashtag Team Fiona, because I agree. This is a film that I think has a outstanding opening, like 25 minutes. And then after that, I get bored completely by this movie. I think it starts out so strong. It is so fantastically funny and imaginative and just spirited. And then all that just vanishes, vaporizes.
I don't believe so. And I would argue that the vast majority of opinion does not believe so. And having watched it again, I was...
Vast majority of opinion, Simon, people are idiots. A lot of them.
I know one that is. So speaking of great things to watch, what did you waste your time on this week?
Look, I wouldn't say I wasted my time. I
would.
Do you know A Different World? Is this a show that's on your radar at all?
I watched it. I was on the Lisa Bonet wagon and was, early Marissa Tomei. So yes, I did watch A Different World, not religiously, I didn't rush home from work to watch it, but
So you didn't join the religion of it. Okay, so if people don't know A Different World, which is understandable because it's been some time, this is a show which launched, I'm going to say 1987. I believe it's the best movie year. But A Different World is a spin-off that took the Denise Huxtable character from The Cosby Show and spun her off into A Different World, where she's at college and has college experiences. So the reason the show exists is because Lisa Bonet and Bill Cosby, there was a fair bit of friction there. And so, he didn't necessarily approve of some of her life choices. But the idea, and it came from Bill Cosby supposedly, was that let's give her her own show where she can kind of, be a bit more adult and be a bit more able to sort of experience some of these things on screen.
She was the breakout sort of star of The Cosby Show. She was the
Absolutely.
The hot ticket item.
But the subtle sort of thing was it gets her off The Cosby Show.
Yeah. Exactly.
It's like the good excuse to make this happen. So he can, make a little bit of cash. Now, what I found really confronting watching the first half of the season of the program. So I'm up to episode 17. I believe there's an appearance or two by Felicia Rashad before the end of this season. So it's not like we've sort of seen the end of it. But there's so much crossover with the Cosby Show. And it's really confronting in this year of 2026 to be sitting on your couch watching phone calls to one Bill Cosby from Hillman's female dormitory through to the Cosby Show household.
Yeah.
It's weird seeing Bill Cosby on screen on Netflix. Like, it's a very strange experience. As a show, it's interesting. It's definitely, I'm watching the first season of a program, and I know that they go through major creative overhaul after this first season. So what I'm watching now is going to be reflective of quite a different show than I'm going to be watching like in a week and a half's time once I've hit up season 2. You mentioned Marissa Tomei's in this. She's cast as like the white girl. She's not in the very first episode, but comes into the second episode in a way that shows often, find themselves a bit of a cast change from episode 2 onwards. And she's given almost nothing to do in this program. Like, I'm in episode 17, and I'd say it's been maybe 10 episodes since there's been like a scene which has prominently featured her and been about her character by any means. You've seen like the sort of supporting characters sort of breaking out, and my understanding is the show goes on, they become the focal point for the series sort of moving forward. I know that in just a couple of episodes' time, we say goodbye to Lisa Bonet from the show, because this is where she got pregnant in real life, and Bill Cosby wanted her not to be starring as Denise Huxtable, pregnant on screen. He didn't want that, so she gets spun back into the Cosby Show for a couple of episodes, and then goes off to like Mozambique or something. I don't know. She goes on a holiday.
It's
so
hard
she's
to
kind of off
imagine
screen
Bill
for a while.
Cosby wielding this much control over women, isn't it? Like, it's strange.
I know,
it's
it's hard to really fathom your mind and wrap it around. Yeah. But the thing is with A Different World is I'm always kind of looking for like sort of classic feeling sitcoms and like good ones. Not every episode's good. It vacillates from this first season. There's a couple of outstandingly very funny, very clever, emotionally sort of driven episodes of this program. And I've been amazed at just sort of how good the show can be. Most of the season is not great TV by any means, but the couple of episodes that have really sort of worked for this program, I'm holding hope that next season when this actually starts to, and I'm going to follow up on this just briefly, the later episode. I'm kind of curious to see where the show goes, because there's so much potential in this as a show, and I'm a bit excited.
And
but the reason I'm talking about this...
Yes, I was going to say the reason we're talking about this is because Netflix are launching a reboot or a reversioning of this one in September.
Absolutely. So it's set in the modern moment with the daughter of two of the characters from the original run of the show.
Yeah. And I think Kadeem Hardison's returning, isn't he, for the second?
So he'll be back. And also, and I can't think of the name of the actress who plays the sort of uppity fifth generation.
Judi Dench. No, not Judi Dench.
Unfortunately, Judi Dench wasn't a member of the African-American-led A Different World. But anyway.
I can't remember either.
Yeah. The hoisey girl is back playing like the wife, so those characters, I don't know if they get together like during the run of A Different World or not. So I'm early in. I don't know the history of this program, and I've tried to keep myself free from spoilers.
We've got all that to look forward to in the weeks ahead.
Well, look, I'm not going to talk about this sort of too much at length, but I probably do want to update on some point saying, did this actually deliver?
Is this the new Mad Men?
Are
you going to do a different world reference every week? Or Wire? Is this another Wire where you're going to keep harkening back to it?
I don't know. What was the show that I was watching? I was watching The X-Files for a bit and talking about that on the podcast.
Yeah, you lost interest in that.
And then it was my Entourage watch, which I stopped watching at the exact point that I was concerned that I probably would.
It's all good stuff. All good television watching stuff. Go back and watch The Princess Bride again. You'll change your mind on that, I'm sure.
I'll watch the first 20 minutes of The Princess Bride.
Yeah, I'm sure.
You know what? I'll commit to watching it all, but I know where I'm going to turn it off.
Okay. Oh, that's great. Screen watching. You can find Screen Watching on Facebook at Screen Watching Podcast, on YouTube at Screen Watching, also on the Instagram at Screen_Watching, I think it is. You can find it just by Googling, and all my writings on the Screen Space newsletter, where you can read my fascinating insight into the mega world, the mega show business world of microdramas in this week's newsletter episode.
The best bit of Simon's newsletter about the microdramas is scrolling down to the comments section and finding a comment by me.
Some blathering idiot decided to wax all on about that took up space. Probably brought a bit of traffic if it's Dan Barrett, because he has a bit of sway in the world of opinion.
Yeah, it's because people value it, Simon.
Clearly, yeah.
Nah.
What do you do with your time when you're not
Well-
answering when you're not bringing down my newsletter?
Well, I'm not trying to serve a dose of reality around the place. Look, I run my own newsletter. It's called Always Be Watching. It is 5 days a week of my blathering opinion coming through, highlighting the fact that microdrama's not really a thing. Expect that to be mentioned at least like 45 times in the newsletter over the next week. There's that. I do a Friday release, which is Always Be Streaming. It's like your TV guide to all the new movies and TV shows that have been released on streaming this past week. This week, it's a Tumbleweed edition. But, see what you can find through there.
Go back and read last week's edition.
And also, just quietly, I'm launching a new newsletter over the next couple of days.
Dan Barrett, you've buried the headline. You should have led the podcast with that. Why? What's it about? What's it doing? What's going on?
Stick around. There's an announcement coming through the Screen Watching newsletter during the week.
Excellent. That's exciting news.
I don't know if I'm going to launch it this week or next, but it's coming. It's mostly formatted.
Is it microdrama based? A lot of good stories coming out of the microdrama industry.
You're not too far off the mark.
Interesting. Oh, it's web content.
Anyway, folks, this has been the Screen Watching Podcast. My name's Dan Barrett from alwaysbewatching.com. Subscribe. Simon?
From Screen Space on Substack. Subscribe, like, restack, all those things you do. Thank you for joining us. Supergirl next week. Very excited about that. Are we going to do one of our Out the Front of the IMAX podcasts?
Yes, sir. Yes, we are.
That'll be exciting. The last one got big numbers. All right.